Welcome to Indira Gandhi National Open University SWAYAM course on Gender Sensitization BGSE 001. In today's session, we would be discussing gender, society and culture. The objective of this session would be to understand the process of how gender is socially constructed. In order to understand this, now let's take a quick example. Let's say that you are traveling by a metro. Now, how would you classify or observe gender in a metro or a bus ride? For that, you can see that there are different kind of people traveling by a metro or a bus. There might be a lady with a basket going to the market to sell her vegetables. There might be a gentleman with a folder going to office, a boy with a school bag, another a girl with a school bag, a lady with a purse going to office. Now, when I am describing them, what am I doing? I am classifying people according to their genders. And how do I know their genders? Is it so easy to define a gender? Is another question. Now, from this example, you would realize that I had classified the people into male or female according to their dresses. Also, I have classified them where they are going with the kind of activities that are doing. Like the gentleman with a folder, I can easily classify or observe that he is going to the office. Likewise, a lady with a big basket on her head, where is she going? She is going to sell her vegetables in the market. So we have seen that in this example, we were easily able to differentiate gender. But the question is it really so easy to define gender? Gender is a matter of culture. It refers to the societal classification into masculine and feminine, as has been stated by Anne Oakley. Now, what is the concept of masculine and feminine in this context? Masculine and feminine. Masculinity and femininity are gender categorizations, whereas male and female are sex categorizations. Now, how do we know the difference between the two? What is gender categorization and what is sex categorization? Now, for that, let's look at different kind of things that are there. Let's look at how do we define sex and gender? Sex is basically the biological difference between man and woman. Sex is a word that refers to the biological differences between male and female, the visible differences in genitalia, the related difference in proactive function. So, this is how we differentiate a person as of which sex he is. When a child is born, he is born with only the sex categorization. The gender categorization comes at a later stage. Now, let's try to understand the concept of gender. Gender refers to behavioral differences between males and females that are culturally based and socially learned. So, the basic difference between sex and gender is one is a biological categorization, whereas the other is a social construction. Now, what are the premises of the social construction of gender? The premises for the social construction of gender lies in the idea that is grounded on the universality of sex and variability of gender. Now, how do we differentiate and try to understand this aspect? Gender constructions, as we have stated, is a construction. So, the construction can vary, can differ. A child if born as a man is a man. A child if born as a woman is a woman. That is a sex categorization. But the behavior, the patterns, the social norms, the values, everything that these categorizations does or behave in a particular manner comes under gender construction, and there is a variability in this. Where does this variability come from? It comes from the societal norms. If a society is a patrilineal society, the norms of marriage, inheritance, kinship would be very different from that of a matrilineal society, where the marriage inheritance rules, the pattern of the society is different. So, based on these differences, again we can say that there is a variable nature in gender. So, now let us try to understand how anthropologists have tried to define gender construction. Anthropologists Judith Butler Moore have argued that the notion of sex or the nature of the biological makeup of man and woman is itself a social construction. So, there is a connotation to it that even the biological construction is also a social construction. Thus, the biological dimension that is usually taken for granted is itself a result of a particular way of thinking about gender. So, that is a product of the culture. Now, why do we call gender as a social construction? What are the basis for it? Now, let us take the example of a child. A child at birth is not born with a gender. It is a social construct that manifests itself through social norms, rules and regulations. Now, let us try to understand this philosophical point of view. John Locke had stated about tabula rasa, that is the theory that human mind is at birth a blank slate without rules for processing data. Now, when a child is born, if we take this example, we can see that the child is born only with a particular sex organ. The child is not born with the assumption or with the notion of how he or she is to behave, how or she is to dress, how he or she is to look at different aspects in a society. So, where does this comes from? To look at it, let us see what is the process whereby a child who is born with a blank slate is being filled with notions. The processes are enculturation and socialization. Now, enculturation is a process by which a human being adapts to his or her culture and learns to fulfill the functions of his status and role. And so, what is socialization? Socialization, the way in which a society integrates its members and the process by which individuals learn to adapt to their society, is known as socialization. Now, where does the process of enculturation begin? Let us have a look at this cartoon picture, a cartoon character. This cartoon character was made in the year 1947 and she is popularly known as Nancy. Now, what happens in this picture? First, we see that the little girl is trying to slide down the stairs, but on the railing. She is not taking the stairs. And her mother says, Nancy, go right back up and come down like a lady. So, her mother stops her activity and says that she needs to come down the stairs like a lady. So, what does this little girl do? She changes her position on the railings and she again slides down. So, from this cartoon character, what do we realize? We realize that there is a process by which a child is being taught how to behave and what to do. A child is being internalized in a particular way to behave as per the norms of the society. So, basically enculturation is a process which starts at the very beginning at the level of the family, because a child is born into a family. Now, what is a family? A family is the smallest unit into which a child is born. A child enters this world with some given characters like a system of belief, a language, parents and siblings and many other relationships, and sometimes social positions also, like the potential heir to a throne, a priestly position, an occupation or a vocation in life. Such are the ascriptive characters of what is understood as social parenthood. Thus, to be born is to have an identity as a member of a society and receiver of a culture. So, when a child is born, the first interaction that the child has is with his family members, and based on this interaction, the conception and the notion of gender is being imbibed and created in the mind of the child. A child is not born with a gender conception, but it is the process of enculturation and socialization that leads to a conception of what gender is. Many a times, if we take a look at the example of a family, in a family sometimes or many a times you might hear a mother telling her daughter, bring me a glass of water, or a father telling his son, don't cry like a girl, or even the word like be a man, stop crying. So, what are this? These are basically verbal affirmations of how a boy or a girl needs to behave, and this is what leads to gender construction. The initial stages in the life of a child, when he or she is being taught the differences of being a man and a woman. It starts at the very heart of a family. So, now again, if it is a patrilineal society or a matrilineal society, there are many other connotations to it also. Now, for a matrilineal society, the upbringing of a child, be it a man or a woman, is different from the upbringing that is there in a patrilineal society for a man or a woman. Why is that so? Because of the rules, the regulations and the norms that are there in those societies. As we know, in a matrilineal society, the inheritance pattern goes from mother to daughter, whereas in a patrilineal society, the inheritance pattern follows the norms of father to son. So, these are the two basic criteria within a matrilineal society or a patrilineal society that also impacts the construction of gender. Like crying like a woman, fighting like a man and so on are some of the verbal expressions that produce shame, guilt or make people conscious when they do things differently. So, these differences are being marked at a very young age, at the age when we are being encultured, at the age when we are being internalized into the norms of a society. In the Indian context, we can take the example of a girl child. Now, what is India, as we know, follows the norms of a patrilineal society. Most of the societies within India follow the norms of a patrilineal society, where the father is the head of the family. And in such a family, most times the daughter is regarded as pariah dhan, which means that she is a dhan, as we know, is valuable or property, which means that she is somebody else's property, and the house where she is living it at the moment is not her main house. She has been brought up in this house to move to her own house, that would be her husband's house. Likewise, the very ritual of Kanya Dan itself during a marriage in a Hindu society talks about the gender construction, where the girl child is regarded as a valuable which needs to be given away. Kanya means a daughter and dan means a gift that has to be given away. So, Kanyadan itself states that how a girl child is being brought up in the family itself. Now, let us move on to marriage. Now, within the social ambit, marriage is a union between a man and a woman such that the child born to the woman are recognized as legitimate offspring of both partners. Now, this quote has been taken from Notes and Queries on Anthropology. Now, from this definition, we see very clearly that marriage itself had defined it as a union between a man and a woman. But in today's age, when we talk about so many other kind of relationships that are coming up, the lesbian relationships, the gay relationships, and also that leads to marriage between same sexes. How true is this definition of marriage? This definition has been accepted itself because it talks about again of gender construction, and the very term legitimate states that marriage itself is a social construct because it is the society which gives a sanction to a marriage. It is the society who decides who can live with whom and who cannot live with whom. Now, in the context of societies, again if we come back to the matrilineal society and the patrilineal society, marriage has a lot of important connotations because it deals with the inheritance of property. As we had discussed in the first slide, in a matrilineal society, the mother is the head of the family, whereas in a patrilineal society, father is the head of the family. So, what happens is that when it is a matrilineal society, the marriage that is being arranged is between the mother's brother's daughter, and in a patrilineal society, most times it is a father's sister's son. Now, what is the emphasis is on this? The emphasis on this is in a matrilineal society, even if inheritance goes from the mother to the daughter, yet the authority lies with the mother's brother. So, the marriage itself is a connotation where you see the social construction of gender and how this gender plays an important role in marriage. Next, we come to kinship. Kinship is the basic principle which decides whom a person can marry and who is out of bounds. Kinship also determines the pattern of descent, lineage, inheritance, power and authority in a family. So, kinship also tells us about the ancestors, whether it is a matrilineal society or a patrilineal society, because it is the pattern of the descent which tells us who are the ancestors and to whom they trace their origin to. Now, within a family, let us talk about rituals. What type of rituals are there and how we see the gender construction in these rituals. Now, let us first talk about the life cycle rituals. What are the life cycle rituals? The life cycle rituals are those rituals which are related to birth and death, also to marriage. And in this context, the concept of purity and pollution plays a very important role when we look at how gender is constructed and how the pollution or purity plays a very important role in these rituals. Now, the birth of a child is a happy occasion, yet for the mother it is a point of time where the mother is segregated and kept separately. Why? Because of the notion of impurity of blood. The child after being born is taken as the boon or the blessing in a family, where the mother has to be confined for almost 40 days till she stops menstruating. So, we see the definite construction of gender in this particular ritual. Again, at death, It is the son in a patrilineal society who is allowed to give the Mukh Agni, which is he is allowed to lit the prey for his family, be it the father or the mother, whereas the daughter is not, the daughter does not have a role to play in this. Likewise, if we look at the Muslim society, we see that women are not allowed inside the graveyard. Likewise, if we talk of temples and dargahs in India, women are allowed, yet they are not allowed inside the inner sanctum of the temple or a dargah because of the notion of purity and pollution. So, even if you go to a temple, you would have to face these issues if you are born as a girl child. Now, in many societies in India, the first time that a girl menstruates, which is known as menarche, there are certain rituals and observations also during this period, and only a girl who is menstruating for the first time has to follow these norms and regulations. For example, we can take the example of Assam, where among the Hindu society, among the people of Assam, there is a particular ritual by which after the first menstruation, the girl is being wedded to a banana tree, a male banana tree. This signifies the fertility cult, because it also shows then that the girl is now able to bear a child. So, these are some of the rituals that we have that are linked to gender. And also in many of the agricultural societies, there are certain norms and restrictions. For example, the plough is not allowed to be touched by a woman. It is the work of a male. So, in such a situation, we see that even objects are being classified as male or female. For example, if you see a 100cc bike, whom would you think of driving it or riding it? It would be a male. It would not be a female who would be riding this bike. That is what the connotation or the construction or the notion of gender is all about. Now, even in studies that has been done in different parts of the world, the differentiation has been marked, and among the Trobriand islanders that were being studied by Malinowski, it was also seen that the women were not a part of the rituals that were there for the fishing community. When they go for fishing, the women were not a part of this ritual. They were kept aside, as women are not allowed to go into the deep sea for fishing. Likewise, if we talk about ritual food, there are certain connotations to it. For example, a woman during her first menstruation is not allowed to partake many kind of food. She is being kept on boiled food or such food that is being sanctioned by the society. Likewise, for a widow, there are restrictions in terms of food. So, these are some of the aspects that we see in the construction of gender, which also leads to objectification of items that are related to either man or woman. If a child is born and he is a boy, then we see the color blue is being used for the boy, whereas the color pink would be naturally used for the girl. But then again, the question arises, is it really true that a boy cannot like a pink color? Or like when we say that boys don't cry, does that mean that boys do not have emotions? No, these are all social constructs. This is how we try to construct or make the norms in a society where we have separate rules and regulations for a man or a woman, and that is where the concept of gender comes into play. How we define objects, how we define a male or a female and classify them, that leads to the construction of gender. Now, to conclude, we can say that gender is a symbolic social construct that gets manifested through our cultural attributes like roles, responsibilities, privileges, etc. It brings forth the differences between a male and a female, biological differences between man and woman related to hormones, chromosomes and genitalia. However, these differences are basically biological differences, but then what we do is that we try to construct the gender out of it, and as Simone had rightly stated, one is not born but made a woman. Thank you.